Nitesh Shah is the head of commodity research at Wisdom Tree. Thanks for joining us, Nitesh. Good to see you. Now, look, all BP's profits are from oil and gas, which is fine while prices are high. What happens after their 2030 net zero target?
It's a great question. As you rightly point out, its results that it just announced were bumper because of the big rebound in oil prices. Remember, in 2020, oil prices were hit a low of 20 on Brent, and now they're trading at close to 90. Now, this can't be it for BP. It has to work on this transition towards a net zero emissions, and that will probably mean that the size of its gas and oil assets are going to fall in favor of renewable types of assets. At the moment, BP is selling more of its old traditional energy types of units at a faster pace than is buying new types of energy units, including solar or wind and so forth. So it's almost shrinking its business in some ways, and it's also engaged in share buyback. So it's probably going to be a smaller company come when it has to meet its net zero targets, but there is a big challenge there. I think BP are trying to accelerate the pace at which they are trying to be operationally net zero. By the year 2030, they want to be 50%. Have a 50% reduction in operational emissions, which compared to like a 35% target earlier on.
So, Nitesh, are you saying that our investors are asking whether BP is spending enough on renewables and those longer-term climate goals?
I think that would be a legitimate question. It's making either a choice of becoming a smaller company by diversifying or disposing of its assets. If it wants to maintain such a scale in terms of energy production, it needs to be buying more of the renewable types of assets to meet future energy needs. So I think that's a legitimate question by investors.
Meanwhile, 6 more North Sea oil and gas fields are set to get the go-ahead. That doesn't seem to quite match with the UK government's green agenda.
Yeah, it does fly in the face of some of the commitments made at the COP26 in November of last year. And I think what's happening is a lot of governments are facing up to the reality that reducing reliance on hydrocarbons is not cost-free. Alternative energy sources are likely to be more expensive, are likely to be less reliable, and the UK population is facing higher energy costs. So this is one of the ways to alleviate some of that pressure. But if it is to be consistent with its policy goals, it looks very questionable whether these fields should be sanctioned.
It's interesting you're saying that now everyone's facing up to the reality that the transition is not going to be cost-free. But, as BP's profits surge, these calls for a windfall tax on oil and gas companies are growing, particularly from the UK opposition. Is it time?
Well, I can easily see why that would be politically a thing that people should be asking. That certain oil companies have made windfall profits in this period of high oil prices, while consumer inflation is running at multi-decade highs, largely driven by energy prices. But it's hard to sort of enact on these things. Zoom the clock back to 2020. Wasn't that long ago. All these oil majors looked like they were on their knees because of collapsing oil prices. What happens when the reverse happens? You can't guarantee oil prices at these levels forever. If there is a windfall tax applied today, does it have to be given away as a subsidy in future years? Is a key question to keep these companies alive.
Just quickly, Nitesh, what would you say the political or the potential economic fallout is of switching to greener forms of power, maybe too quickly? Because that's something that has been put out there, hasn't it? When you're looking at all of the costs and balancing it out with the price of energy being so volatile, maybe 2050 for the UK's target, maybe that's just too soon?
I think you've got to balance off where economic costs are in terms of how much higher costs households and governments are facing versus what happens to the climate. The scientists seem to be in a large agreement that the environment will be unsustainable after a certain period of time. So if you leave the pollution abatement too long, it becomes more costly at the back end, just because the planet becomes so uninhabitable. So it's almost better to take the cost up front, but to recognize there are costs. And one of the reasons we're having energy price volatility is possibly that we haven't invested enough in the renewable sources. There's not enough investment in the renewables to overcome the deficit in the production in some of the traditional energy sources. So maybe we're not moving fast enough.
So speculate to accumulate, to coin a phrase. Nitesh Shah, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.